I went back, John Wooten of the Fritz Pollard Alliance, which really tracks minority hiring and minority opportunity, had told the Tennessean that Horton was uncomfortable with the process, felt insulted by the process. Ray Horton I didn't call Ray Horton. Ray Horton called me and gave me a very strong quote denying that. He said, "I'm not insulted. I was very happy Mrs. Strunk gave me an interview. I think she was very impressed with me. I was told some ideas I gave are going to be implemented. I'm still under contract. I'm talking about a contract extension. The insulted comment is not true. I'm very happy. I was very happy to be interviewed." Now, is that what Ray Horton felt at that time, or did Ray Horton feel like for career survival he couldn't be seen as being upset and he needed to smooth things over? I can't say for sure, but I'm sure the Titans are going to point to that quote in any kind of legal battle here, saying that he was fine, and that he's going to say his true feelings were what John Wooten said. And what he's saying now after hearing Mike Mularkey's podcast sentiments from 2 years ago on a not very well heard Pittsburgh podcast.
Yeah, it's the first I've heard of it, of this podcast interview and him saying that. And I think it was probably a poor choice of words by Mike Mularkey, but you brought this up, Paul. Mike Mularkey owes nothing to the Titans and is not real happy with the Titans and how things went down. So he's not trying to protect anyone there. I have since today talked to someone who was there for the process the whole time and said it was a sham, that he had the job, just as you said earlier, that everybody in the building knew he had the job, that Amy Adams Strunk preferred him and was going to hire him, and they fulfilled the Rooney Rule by interviewing Ray Horton.
And Terrell Austin.
Yes. And Ray Horton was easy because he's there. They had to pay for travel to get anyone there. I mean, this is the problem, though. And I think on its face, the Rooney Rule, there's great intention behind it, right? But this is where it becomes a problem in that this was a sham. Ray Horton's right, but it's the rule that made it the sham. They had to do it. They knew who they were going to hire, but they had to fulfill the Rooney Rule with league rules to do it. So they interviewed people after they knew who they were going to hire. And those people didn't get a fair chance because they already had their hire.
I think, there is some middle ground here where she's allowed to know what she wants to do. I mean, she has to be allowed to know what she wants to do. She owns the team. She's allowed to hire.
I completely agree with that.
But the Rooney Rule forces a situation where she's obligated to sit down with at least one other person who, has to be willing to do it, knowing that he's probably not getting the job, or he's not getting the job, but that it benefits him in some way to sit down with Amy Adams Strunk and John Robinson, where they may, at an owner's meeting, talk to another owner who might be looking for someone and say, hey, Ray Horton really impressed us when we talked to him. Terrell Austin really impressed us when we sat down with him. You ought to talk to him. That's supposed to be kind of the contagion element of this, that these guys, because of this rule, get additional exposure that they may not have otherwise gotten, that if it doesn't pay off from the interview in question, creates some buzz for them, creates some rub-off effect.
How'd that work out for Ray Horton?
It didn't.
He had one more job in 2019. He's been out of the league since. So now he's jumping on this lawsuit.
Two more jobs. Yeah.
Well, I'm saying a guy who contacted you to dispute a claim that he was upset about the interview now has been out of the league, out of coaching for 3 years. Last job was 1 year in Cleveland in 2019. So now he's jumping on this lawsuit to say that he's upset about a 2020 interview where Mike Mularkey said exactly what everyone in that building knew at the time that he was getting the job.
And it didn't work out for Steve Wilkes either.
I guarantee you Ray Horton knew that Mike Mularkey was getting the job.
Yeah, it would have been naive for him. It doesn't look good for him if he didn't know, because then he would have been out of touch with what everybody in the building knew, like your source said, which I knew, which the media covering the beat knew, which the city knew. Everybody objected to it because people thought the Titans should do better than Mike Mularkey, who was a twice-failed head coach getting a third chance.
It was very much an unpopular decision.
Amy Adams Strunk changed her mind in 2 years, and he got fired after he took the team to the playoffs before John Robinson got to hire his own guy in Mike Vrabel. Let's go to Steve Wilkes. I mean, Steve Wilkes, I don't think he was a very good head coach, but he's got some legitimate complaints in his thing. He got fired after 1 year working with the GM, who was suspended for a portion of that year for DUI. Black mark on his record, not on Steve Wilkes' record. Josh Rosen, a busted in 1 year quarterback who was drafted, what, Chad, 12th?
Yeah, he was a high pick.
Guess who didn't pick him? Steve Wilkes. Steve Keim picked him. Now, you could say what you want, but the failures of that Arizona Cardinals team, you could fairly, if you're pinning them more on the coach or the GM, who's it more fair to pin them
Well,
on?
here's where it gets difficult, though. I agree with everything Wilkes is saying and what you're saying about the shadiness of those two situations and how differently it worked out for both, right? Not knowing anything personally about Steve Wilkes and his personal relationships with ownership or people around the building. I know nothing about that. Huh?
The Billwell family.
Yeah, I know nothing about, how that all worked out. But you still have to show evidence of racism.
Right, which is hard to prove.
So that's going to be difficult because if there's not evidence of that, then you've got a problem, which is why I keep going back to the biggest, most serious thing in the Brian Flores lawsuit is the implication that Stephen Ross was trying to bribe him to throw games. And that could lead to problems for him. And I want to go back to Ray Horton and the Titans. It is Amy Adams Strunk prerogative to hire someone she's comfortable with that has been with the organization that she felt like did a good job in an interim capacity for the full-time job.
Which he did. He did a pretty good job, given the terrible circumstances.
It was an
Ken
unpopular
Wisenhunt
decision with the
left
fan
him
base at the time, right? Very unpopular in the city of Nashville. Made the decision anyway, went full steam ahead, eventually parted ways when things didn't go well and he wasn't doing what the organization wanted. So I have no issue with that. The problem then becomes when Mike Mularkey admits to exactly what we all knew about it. Well, Ray Horton, I think, kind of rightfully could throw his name in the hat and say, well, look, here it is. Here's an example where they're not abiding by the actual spirit of the Rooney Rule. They had their decision made, and I was a token interview that they had no interest in even conducting the interview. And he's not saying they didn't take it seriously, but he's saying that he was not seriously considered because the decision was made. This is the slippery slope we go down. I'll give an example from college. Marcus Freeman, the head coach at Notre Dame. Notre Dame had Marcus Freeman on staff, loved him. It is Notre Dame's prerogative to elevate Marcus Freeman to the head coaching job when Brian Kelly leaves. They shouldn't have to go interview a white coach or any coach outside of Marcus Freeman if they want to elevate Marcus Freeman. Now, if it's just going to be this broad, well, owners across the NFL are classically racist because they hire white coaches to be head coaches, then that's a tough argument to make. And it's definitely a tough argument to prove. So, Paul, we've talked about it, but that balance of an owner doing what they feel is right for the organization while also, doing what's right in terms of interviewing a diverse list of candidates. An example, Pete Carroll, we'll have Armando Salguero on tomorrow, and he wrote a story with sources at Outkick about this. But Pete Carroll goes all willy-nilly, goes off on ownership across the NFL at the owners' meetings based on reports, yelling at them to say, be more diverse. This is your fault. Stop only hanging out with people who look like you in your own close little circle and be more diverse in your hiring. And then Armando Salguero's writing, and this is Pete Carroll, who hasn't hired a black coordinator in his time with the Seahawks.
With a long time and a lot of coordinators.
Which screams of hypocrisy.